Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We are all so excited that you are here this evening to join us for this presentation about designing conventions with IL, a guide for UX professionals. So before we start, could you please just type in the chat box where you are watching us from? So which country, which city? We would like to know. It's always nice to see people from all over the world watching us. Hello, hello. Thank you for joining. Oh, hello from UK. Wonderful. So please keep typing and I will start. Okay, from Germany, from USA, New York, UK, London. Wonderful. Thank you all. We are so excited that you're here with us. Oh, from Denmark, from India. Wonderful group. So this is our agenda for today. And now, before we go to the main part of the presentation that you all came here today for, I will tell you just a little bit about UX Academy, the company that is bringing you this webinar. So we have been around for over 4 years. We have taught over 1,000 students, and we deliver UX design classes live online on Zoom. As you can see here, we have around 10 students in the group and 1 course instructor. So it's very small classes sizes, and students are able to work efficiently with each other, to develop relationships, to work closely with our industry experts who are our course instructors, with our mentors. As you can see here, our students are coming from many companies from all over the world. And now I'll just tell you about a few of the tools that we use in our courses. So our courses, as I already said, are delivered on Zoom. We use Figma, which is industry prototype tool for prototyping our courses to Google Drive. So recording of the course would go on Google Drive along with the slides presentation. So if you're not able to join the course for that day, or you're not able to watch some part of the course, or if you just want to rewatch it, it will be there for you. And also for communication during the course, we use Slack. So if you join the course, there would be 3 Slack groups. You would have 1 group with your entire group. Then you would have just 1 group with your team, because you would be working on a project with a team of 3 or 4 other students. And then you would have 1 Slack channel with your client, because you would be working on a project to develop UX design portfolio. So during the course, you would develop a full portfolio, which will help you learn as well as land a job after the course. And now I'll just tell you briefly about our payment plans. So we offer 2 flexible payment plans, which are Noma and Klarna. So in order to make our courses even more accessible and affordable, so you can pay in installments. But if you would like to learn more about our payment plans, you can always email us or go to our website, click our courses and then payment plans, and everything is explained there in detail. So now I will invite our host Sylvia that will be presenting tonight. Hello, Sylvia. How are you?
Hello, hi, Katarina. I'm good, thank you. And thank you for having me on, and thank you for the viewers for being here tonight.
Of course. We are all so excited about your webinar this evening. Now I will remove myself off, but thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to this presentation.
Okay, so thank you. Well, why is it so important to speak about AI and in particular about conversational AI in this time and age? Well, AI has already broken ground in any possible way. Stuff like navigation apps rather than fraud detection, social media. We are just so used to kind of use this kind of stuff that we tend to forget that all of these things are by all means powered by AI. And seemingly in the past 5 years or so, we've seen a tremendous progress in the field of AI in almost every of its sub areas. So from vision, text and speech recognition, natural language processing. And this has really helped computers to improve their ability to kind of see, to hear, to understand the world around that. And that's happened. Sorry for that. I'm just going to switch on the light on again. But this is not happening, so I'm just carrying on removing myself from the screen. Technological progress has helped improve the abilities to understand the world around them, leading to dramatic advances in the field of, in many fields, in many areas of our life, from the food chain to healthcare. And there's lots of talking about generative AI, so systems able to kind of produce creative artifacts in their own right. And this is kind of testament of the great expectations that we have around this new AI-driven era. Now, the chief capability of AI, so what is it that makes this technology so interesting for businesses, is really the ability to mimic the capabilities of human brain, meaning that these systems can really, in terms of decision making and problem solving specifically, meaning that these systems can really learn from users' input and from context, from the environment around them, and they can actually modify their actions accordingly. They can evolve over time. They can learn over time, and they do that in a sort of, they really are able to kind of learn from understanding the environment rather than acting upon rules and codes that has been written beforehand. They don't just simply execute like old computational systems, but they do kind of learn autonomously. And this enables important things from a business perspective, automation to start off of tedious manual tasks, but primarily what AI is mostly coveted for is really its ability to help us make better predictions and therefore better decisions. Because as opposed to a human brain, these systems have, of course, the compute power. They do have the infrastructure to kind of ingest, to collect, and to analyze huge amounts of data that no human brain could possibly do. And this has a tremendous impact for businesses. On the right, you see these are the 6 core intents that we usually refer in IBM when we speak about AI. And these are basically the primary reasons underpinning any enterprise adoption of AI. So things like accelerating research. There are 2.5 million papers published every year in English. And when all these unstructured data, unstructured text becomes structured, researchers can spend less time sifting through documents and actually can spend their time looking at the most valuable insights. Anticipating and preempting disruptions, so predicting maintenance of an industrial facility. So AI is really able to help us predict when an asset can fail or might fail. But I think that definitely the most important intent for today's discussion is definitely that one of enriching interactions. And this leads me seamlessly to raise a crucial point, because the reason why we think the AI is going to play such a transformative role from a design perspective and from a user experience perspective is that every encounter with AI it generates an interaction and the user experience that kind of evolves and that can change over time. Because the dumb objects of old are really becoming alive as these systems can learn from the environment, learn from new input, learn from users, and they can modify their actions accordingly. And this is actually changing the playing field for the UX profession, because designers really need to be able to kind of plan ahead for this kind of shifting experiential landscape when they do plan for the user journey, for the 2B scenarios. Another crucial reason why AI is set to change sort of the theoretical foundation of the UX domain is that it is enabling a kind of a shift from a kind of experience that has been until now primarily transactional to a sort of relational, so to speak, kind of relationship with digital media. And this is key because machines are really entering spaces that have been forever exclusive to human relationships. And I think that nothing could embody this concept better than conversational interfaces. The conversation is just one fundamental unit, if not the most fundamental and the most meaningful unit of human society. In this slide, I put Replica in the bottom right of the slide. And Replica is basically what is called a companionship app. It's a virtual actor that users can socialize with. And this really comes down to this idea of affective computing. So the idea, it's an old one, but it's the idea that computers can really be built as to act as if they are having emotions. And on top of that, they can also detect a user's emotion, they can understand emotions, and they can respond appropriately and create a more emotional, a more relational kind of bond. When we speak about conversational AI, what we think about primarily are those chatbots, those virtual assistants, and I'm going to use these two terms interchangeably throughout the presentation. And these have proven to be very lucrative technologies, particularly after the pandemic, in solving some of the most urgent and mission-critical business problems. What do? Is that they do support human agents across the customer journey, across the user journey, in some instances replacing the human agent. And they are used as a kind of a service to kind of perform a multitude of tasks, from recommending sizes rather than answering frequently asked questions, for instance. But customer support is not the only use case for conversational AI. Other important ones are, for instance, as I mentioned before, Replica. So Replica is a companionship app. So apps that are used to kind of for humans to socialize, or kind of well-being kind of apps, or mental health apps. In healthcare, I mean, conversational AI is making headway as well, because it really makes for more convenient, more affordable services, patient-wise, while business-wise is also very important to kind of cut down on operational costs and to improve processes and to improve also the administrative kind of workflow. Computer software, Internet of Things, of course, everyone has, many of us, they do have in our households at least one connected device, from Alexa to Siri. And these devices really use automated speech recognition to kind of detect and understand people around them. And another interesting use case, HR, for conversational AI, for a variety of sub-use cases like onboarding or training employees, or kind of sifting and assessing CVs. So this is an interesting, very interesting kind of field for conversational AI. So we can really sum up that conversational AI is really ushering in a new bold era of lifelike conversational experiences, whereby businesses are really able to improve the customer experience, and at the same time they are also able to kind of minimize their workloads and to improve their processes, saving costs, and also addressing some use cases, some problems that they weren't able to address in the past. So this is the fundamental importance of conversational AI, user side and business wise. Now, it's really important, I think, from a design perspective, to kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes. So what is the technology underpinning conversational AI, and to kind of get a sense of how the design process should be structured around this technology. So there are two very specific technologies, or macro technologies that kind of complement each other behind in creating this magic. One is machine learning, and the other is natural language processing, or NLP. So NLP is really, to put it very simply and in sort of very simplistic way, is a machine learning based technology which really is able to kind of analyze the input from a user and to detect patterns in speech, in words, or in outcomes or in utterances, and then is able to kind of elaborate a response to that kind of input. How does it work? So there is an input phase, an input generation phase, a data ingestion phase is also called, where basically the user produces an input, and this can be speech or text. So there has to be an interface of some kind. There is an analysis phase where the machine analyzes the input from the user. If it's just text-based, it will use a technology called natural language understanding, NLU, which is a component of natural language processing. If it's speech-based, it will use a combination of natural language understanding and automated speech recognition to kind of, and what happens in this phase, that the machine is really detecting the intention of the user. And I will come back later on this term. Then there is a dialogue management phase, during which stage the machine is really able to formulate an answer to the input of the user. And then there is another phase, which is more kind of an iterative kind of process, which is the continuous development, whereby, thanks to machine learning, the system, the conversational AI system, is really able to improve itself, to improve the accuracy of its responses. I said before the word intention that like kind of is captured in this kind of analysis phase by the machine, and intention is really pivotal because the quality of a conversational AI tool or technology really lies in its ability not just to detect the literal, the actual meaning of a word or of a sentence, but actually it really comes down to its ability to go beyond the literal meaning and to kind of understand what's buried behind the words, what is actually that users are after, what do they mean by saying that thing. And in that respect, I would like to highlight you an interesting project, Project the Beta. It's made with Watson Assistant and Watson Discovery, two IBM technologies. And the reason why this project is ever so interesting to me is partly because I've been working in marketing in back to those days. So I know some of the struggles of marketers when they do push surveys or they do sentiment analysis, and so they do have this whole bunch of opinionated text in their hands, and they don't know how to go about and start and analyze it and to kind of make sense out of all of these opinionated unstructured text. And really this tool really helps to kind of connect disparate phrases to one only intent. So it kind of clusters intents and connects very disparate phrases to each one of them. So it's really a tool that is used to sense making, and you can measure the ability and the capacity of a conversational AI tool by its ability of recognizing very different phrases, because we do as humans, we do express intent in a variety of ways depending on the context of our language abilities, or our stilistical kind of patterns in the use of our language. So that's really important. Let's come, I think, to the saucy part, because actually this is more about the UX. So how to design great AI conversations? Well, the first piece of advice that I would like to pass on is really start with your user. And this might sound very trite and very given, but you might be surprised at how often in conversational AI this gets overlooked. And it's really important that you start from the purpose of your chatbot, and the purpose in both users and business terms. It's really important because actually, as I said before, chatbot, digital assistant, intelligent assistants are really services. So they do perform something to help user achieve a goal, to accomplish a goal. So it is really, really important that you assess if a chatbot, a digital assistant, is what you need in that very situation, or you might need something else. You might need a website to convey maybe the same amount of information in a more timely or in a more efficient manner. So just don't design a chatbot because you have the technology to do so. There must be a business and a user purpose. And the second piece of advice that I would like to pass is be really aware, because designing conversations is a really complex matter, because human conversations can be extremely complex. So be aware of how humans communicate, not just humans as human beings, and more specifically how your users do communicate. And this ties back to what I said, just start from your users. You need to start from the segment you are designing for. With that said, let's see how a typical conversation design process unfolds. So we start from finding what we call a minimum viable set of questions or topics, and these are the questions that you can start really train your system on. And it might seem like a daunting task to kind of find out what is this minimum viable set of questions. So the practical thing that you can do is to ask people, and people can be stakeholders or knowledge domain experts or your users in that particular topic, in that particular area, in that particular domain. Other than that, you can also look at frequently asked questions. For instance, start from a website. Frequently asked questions are a great place to start, actually. And then you can dig deeper. And the next level could be you go through customers' reviews rather than emails, rather than the transcripts from customer support center. And then, of course, it has to be a concerted effort with the company to get hold of all this information, and then prioritize these kind of questions. Again, you will need stakeholders, and we will go back on that. And once you've got your set of questions, you might kind of infer from them what is called intent, so the user goal behind each specific set of question or each specific question. And you might start plugging these intents into your conversational tool of choice. In this case, I'm using Watson. So you insert an intent, and this comes a very creative part for a designer, which means you need to kind of brainstorm, and you need to kind of find out all the possible ways, or the most possible ways in which a user might rephrase that intent. So for instance, if the intent is to retrieve my account information, users might ask how I lost my password, or they might say I lost my password, or how can I log in? So they use different words, they use different phrases. So the more phrases you add around one intent, the more the machine is going to be able to kind of recognize, to kind of connect that phrase to that particular intent. And another important step is to build out what we call the entities. Entities are really, we can describe it as objects in the form of nouns. They kind of pop up in the utterances, in the word, in the sentences that users do. For instance, if we have a chatbot that is helping users who are struggling with retrieving the bank account information, you can create an entity which is called account information, and you can list all of the things, all of the objects that can fold logically into that category. That might be password, that might be login, that might be profile. So all of these things that they do kind of logically connect to that kind of entity. And by putting together entity and intent, what happens is that the machine is really able to formulate that response, because it's really able to do what I showed you before with Project the Beta. So put together intent and entities, and kind of recognizes when a word, it kind of calls, it ties up to a particular intent, and it formulates a response using those entities, using those words. And important, really try to test this solution before launching in kind of near real world kind of situations. I'll give you an example of that. This is a project made for Pfizer, which is a giant player in the financial sector in the US. So basically they implemented this conversational agent to kind of tear up the process of updating all the card readers for merchants. And that was a very tedious and off-putting process, whereby merchants would spend up to 20 minutes on the phone just to get a card reader updated. So they just wanted to implement this conversational AI to speed things up a bit. But what did they do crucially is that they conducted tests before launching this project. And they tested things like, so the conversational assistant was called Maeve. And so they tested basically things like voice, intonation, the listener's fatigue, so the fatigue of the merchants on the other side. And crucially, they also tested whether Maeve, so this assistant, was really able to understand users in any kind of conditions, because merchants sometimes they do operate in really noisy environments. They might be in restaurants rather than in shops, or they might operate on a low-grade phone line. So crucially, and what is really important from a design point of view, in my opinion, in this project, what's the key takeaway for me was that the choice of words that was crafted for this assistant was really made in a way that any kind of customer could understand them in any kind of situation. So they didn't go for particular words that could be possibly misunderstood in a very noisy environment. They just selected they specifically crafted the list of words just to really be more accessible and more audible in any kind of circumstance. So that is and that ties back again to know your user, do your research, and speak with your stakeholders. You really need to be able to understand the context where these systems are operating. Some UX best practices. So if you go into literature or into academic papers, you'd be struck, I was struck by the fact that a playbook for evaluating the UX of conversational interfaces doesn't exist as yet. And this, there are interesting experiments, but not a finite playbook. And this, I think, speaks volumes about the novelty of conversational AI, not because, I mean, the interfaces, I mean, they have been around for quite a long time, but actually now we are in this kind of perfect storm where we do have these amazing technological progress. So we do have incredible solutions, but we also do have more use cases, more business needs, and more users needs. And so this is the perfect storm that kind of makes these field really interesting and still a little bit, you know, seminal in kind of so to speak. So if you go through the web, there's lots of advice about how to design. There is lots of resources, good resources on usability. But I just wanted to wrap up some tips that to me are most important, because sometimes either are overlooked, but also because they kind of help you get the design process right since the beginning. And the first piece of advice I would like to pass is really host workshops with your key opinion leaders, with your users, with your key stakeholders. Design thinking workshops are really ideal to kind of brainstorm topics, to kind of understand the user's needs and the needs of every stakeholder and the context, as I was saying before, kind of investigate what's going on around your conversational AI. And it's really important that you brainstorm the topics, so the kind of the initial questions that you should base your conversational AI upon, and the intents of your users. And you can really do a co-writing activities like writing user stories together with your stakeholders. And in those very sessions, another good idea is to kind of lay out what is the to-be flow, the to-be scenario of your conversational flow, starting from what is called the happy path. And by this, I can describe this as the dialogue which runs smoothly from answer to question, from chatbot input to user input, until a user accomplishes their goal. So there's no mistake, there's no misunderstanding. There is A, B, A, B, A, B, and finally the users are able to do what they set out to do. And of course, this is too good to be true, because oftentimes, I mean, conversations don't go often that way. So you really need to plan ahead also for what could be the potential pain point, mistakes, misunderstanding, hesitancies, and you really try try to kind of create all alternative paths that kind of stem from that happy path. The happy path is very ideal, sometimes happens, but very rarely is the case. Or I mean, it depends on the situation. It depends. You might have a very simple kind of flow, and yeah, it may happen, but it might most of the time it doesn't. So yeah, it's important to have this flow kind of, and again, how you handle errors, how you understand how you should deal with this kind of situation, with this kind of divergent paths. Again, you have that. This is why it's important that you stay in the workshop with your stakeholders, because this is something that you should handle also from people from the company. I mean, if there is an error, you need to be able to understand where you need to call for a live agent, for instance, and I will go back to this again. This is an example. On the left, you see the happy path. So basically everything runs smoothly. On the right, lots of errors. And so you need to be able to understand what the chatbot or the digital assistant is supposed to answer, what it's supposed to do, and try to figure it out. In the context of the workshop, really important that you do that with your stakeholders. You really need to define the agent persona or the chatbot persona. This is important because actually what happens, it's a conversation with an artificial intelligence, but actually what users expect is that the conversation is natural. And what you really need to do is to kind of figure out, kind of unfold that conversation as if it's happening in a human-to-human context. So it's really important to kind of nail down what could be the traits, the personality of the agent, and also kind of context. Think about, we are in a shop, for instance. So the person, the assistant, of course, has a kind of a salesy kind of language, but at the same time, they have a personality, a personal character, and at the same time, they do work for a specific company. So think about someone working at Urban Outfitters might express themselves in a different way from someone working at Prada, for instance. So really comes down to the context, to the audience that also you have in mind. And this is an example. Unfortunately, I couldn't play the video anyway. This is and there's a mistake. Actually, the name of the chapter is Brew. And what I like about it, this is actually a chapter which is designed to kind of introduce young people to delicate topics related to sex education, and also to kind of help parents dealing with topics that they might feel embarrassed to talk to with their children. And so what I like about it is that the chart is really accessible, is really it feels safe in a kind of a way, it feels delicate, it feels intimate, and it feels really accessible. And it comes down to defining a persona for that particular audience, for that particular topic. And I want to stay on Rue a little bit more to kind of talk about one other piece of advice that I would give. There's been a bunch of studies around the fact that many users might find it awkward to speak to a conversational agent just because it's a new technology, and it just feels downright awkward maybe to speak to someone who's not a human, or maybe because they don't know actually where to start from. And this is actually the case also in a human-to-human conversation. Sometimes we just don't need how to approach a person. We don't need what questions are we reasonably expected to ask. And so it's really important to provide prompts, to provide some suggestions about how to start the conversation. And Rue does that. If you click on the input bar, there is a panel which slides it from the bottom, and you have an option for input your text, but also a list of the most searched topics, or the topic that the chatbot is really well suited to answer. And this is really a way you can really, sometimes you have these chatbots where you don't know really where to start from, because you actually don't know what is the scope of the chatbot, what questions is it really going to be able to answer. So really provide these, I should call them nudges, so these small inputs to kind of kick the ball and initiate that conversation, particularly if you know that your user might be a little bit agnostic of the domain you're designing it. They might not be familiar with the thing. So just to give those little prompts. A chatbot or a digital assistant should give only the information that is requested for the user to accomplish that goal. No more, no less. And this is the principle of quantity in Greece's theory. Paul Greece was a philosopher, language philosopher, and he made a lot of studies around communication, human communication, and he came up with 5 important maxims. I put the link at the bottom of the presentation if you wanna go through that. But the principle of quantity is actually, I think, possibly one of the most difficult to kind of get you right, because it really requires to strike that balance between withholding information that you shouldn't do, but also do not give and do not kind of anticipate too much information in the same input from the chatbot. So it is really about reaching that sweet spot between in the quantity of what you say. When Plan went to pass to a live agent, I was kind of blown away by the fact that there's been research around the fact that when we experience a violent emotion, that could be anger, and that could be irritation, or we are upset, or we are in a conflict, in a situation of conflict, when we are speaking with an agent, we want to speak to a human being. So when we want to deal, when we are quarreling, when we are in a conflict, we really would like to do that with a person rather than with a machine. And that's really important to think about that, because you can really plan for the system to kind of detect a situation of conflict by analyzing words, by analyzing speech, intonation, and stuff, and to kind of design another path, which is not the happy path, where you deflect that person to an agent all of a sudden. And this is important to plan ahead with your stakeholders and kind of understand where these potential areas of conflict, where anger is most likely to overcome our users along the path, where do you experience anger the most or conflict the most, and so try to preempt that. And particularly, it's useful in these situations maybe also to go through, if you have the transcripts from phone calls, customer calls, you might be able to spot this kind of conflictive situations in your exchange. Again, design a natural conversation because users do expect a natural flow. They do expect, actually, they project the same expectations that they have for a human being on an artificial entity. And therefore, sometimes it just feels awkward when these expectations are disappointed. So this is just a bunch of very practical things, like curating the timing between a user's question and a chatbot answer. Just give it just 1 second. It just feels more natural. Include universals, include greetings. So everything, just really think of how a normal conversation, human to human, in a particular context, just unfold. And on hand in hand with that, not just natural, the conversation has to be effective. And this really comes down to the quality of your questions. Go for yes and no questions, selection questions, or identification questions, which are really closed-ended, and they can really help you kind of progress the conversation further. So do that in a way that users can jump from one segment to another segment of the conversation, because the purpose is really to go to that goal. And be aware also about other things, like the longer the question, the longer the answer. This is a psychological principle that has been researched around. So really try to craft that question in a way that is conducive to the goal, rather than to open or too vague. Convenient ways out. This ties back to the era. So just adopt this circular approach. So if users just get swayed, or there's an error, there's a mistake, just give them the option to go back a step rather than have to start altogether the operation. And also, when you end the conversation, just not end abruptly, but maybe give the option to initiate another conversation just right now, maybe on another topic. So give that prompt, not just end the conversation. It just feels nicer. And the last point, which is one of the most important in terms of for the emerging narrative around ethics and ethics in AI, is beware of bias when you train your conversational AI. And I'll give you this example, which is quite an old one, and is not actually a conversational AI, but actually was AI for HR, and that was Amazon's HR. So basically, they created this AI to evaluate the best fit in talent pooling, so to evaluate resumes. But what did they do? And the reason why they scrapped the project at the very end, because the project, I mean, that AI turned out to be biased against women. What did they do? The reason behind this, it was allegedly that they trained the AI only with male CVs, so CVs from men, and apparently women and men do use different wordings in their CV. They do use different words to speak about job related kind of topics. So words like execute, boost, these were very much into male CVs, and this is why they did train the AI with these CVs. They did the test possibly primarily with men rather than women, and so and this was the result. So and you know, it's really, it really comes down to it's very much design responsibility also to make sure that this doesn't happen, and because it was really down to the choice of the words. So really be aware of this kind of things. So be aware of inclusiveness and fairness kind of arguments when you train your AI, when you train for the dialogue, and you kind of select the words that should be recognized by your AI, as I showed you the process before. And that's it. So I hope I passed you some interesting knowledge about this topic. This is an extreme interesting field, at least for me, but it's also very challenging. It's quite complex to design conversations. And yeah, thanks for listening.
So thank you, Sylvia, and hi everyone. So my name is Adriana, and I'm a part of UX Academy team. So today I'll be the one opening the Q&A sections. So feel free to ask questions. Sylvia, I think this presentation is quite interesting, especially virtual assistants that you mentioned. I think they're quite interesting. So guys, feel free to ask any questions and Sylvia will give you the answer. And while
hopefully,
no problem. Yeah, no problem. And while we're waiting, I just wanted to ask you what you talk about, like positive things about artificial intelligence. Can you say something like negative about artificial intelligence? Like it's good for UX, but it's kind of replacing people, I think. What do you think about that?
Yeah, okay. It's a technology, so it can be used for good and can be used for bad. And this is why I think we are talking a lot about ethics in AI, ethics in the AI process, in terms of, as I said, with the example of Amazon, building the model, using the data, and that's one thing. But also, and I think this is one thing that designers are very much involved with, in kind of figuring out, because actually what AI is supposed to do is kind of supporting and augmenting human capabilities, in the sense that sometimes there are just things that a human can't do, and sometimes there are just situations where a company can't handle thousands of calls, the customer service is exploding, and this is literally where it is not replace, it is replacing what a company maybe can't really provide, because they don't have the capacity to absorb thousands of calls. So in this sense, is augmenting. Then, as you said, there are, and I said that before in the presentation, there are instances where there is a replacement, and in that case, usually what happens is that that person is retrained to cover a different kind of role, because by the time you implement AI solutions, there is a whole host of new roles that might open up. And most of the time, when you design for these systems and you implement that in companies, what happens is that the most tedious tasks, or the most kind of tasks the humans can just, they are not enough to carry, they are kind of replaced But then these people need to, they do have different tools to use, and basically what AI does is changing the task rather than chopping the task altogether.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? Yeah.
yeah,
So
it makes
that is,
sense.
yeah.
Sorry about that. So we have a lot of questions. Do you want to hear them?
Yeah, I start from,
Don't be afraid. I will show it to you.
y-
So I think that it's also pretty important not to make a question process too long before reaching a real person support. What do you think about it?
yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, it depends on the situation. As I said, in conflict situation, in a situation of conflict, it might be like wise to kind of pass the conversation on to a live agent. It's a very delicate situation because ideally, many people would really be glad to kind of accomplish their goal just making a few clicks, or speaking like and and just interacting with the chatbots the least possible, and then get jobs done without having to call people. I mean, sometimes calling an agent kind of slow the process down, and many people are just not happy to hold on the phone, and this is why if a conversation agent is designed well, it really takes out unnecessary calls and to agents who are oftentimes overloaded with work and with unnecessary calls. um, so yeah, it really depends on the situation. I mean, these systems are usually designed to kind of avoid overloading human agents, and to kind of resolve things, just by inputting and answering users' questions, and and executing what users are asking. If that answered the question.
Yeah, it's half-half,
Yeah, I think there are
basically.
situations where it's yeah, it's right to send people off to a live agent, particularly when the chat was not really able to be helpful in any meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, next question is quite interesting. I think it's like, when would you ask for the name and email address of the chat visitor?
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting. Ideally, it depends on the chat, because if you go to a customer support for a bank, for instance, you ideally are up, you have already logged in. Um, so yeah, you if you speak with the chat in a kind of customer support kind of use case, you have to provide identification at some point, but usually this happens before you access the chat, because you are already in the kind of environment of the company who provides the chat, I should say. Whereas if you think about different other kinds of of assistant that might be more recreational, or this kind of thing, that might be, yeah, it really depends, because in those cases you might plan for something which doesn't require users to give their email address, or to give them maybe just when they do ask for a service. So they might have, assuming, I'll give you an example. I do have maybe I want to have a consultation, a mental health consultation. So I just start chatting with this kind of mental health digital assistant. So I do have something, but then if I want to go further, if I really want to ask for a service, at that point they ask me for my email, because at that point I'm starting having also kind of more transactional kind of interaction, so to speak. I don't know if it answered the question, but usually is that you identify the user, and it's beforehand, because you access a service in the context of an organization, of a commercial entity or institutional entity, depending if it's a business, or you are in the healthcare, for instance.
Okay. Well, we have a lot of questions. So just in case if we don't manage to answer all these questions, you can type those questions in chat box when live is done, and we will answer you as soon as possible, basically. So would you like to hear next questions
Yeah,
while we
definitely.
have time? Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. So Musk has said he fears artificial intelligence could one day outsmart humans and endangers us. What's your opinion on that?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't
thought about it
know.
too. Yeah.
It's a personal question or is a person working in it? As I give the answer that I will give as a person working where I work. We don't know. I mean, the technology progresses apace. So at the moment, there ain't any premises for what you say, uh, kind of, but we don't know. I mean, because there has been tremendous progress. So personally, I would say that everything is possible. It really comes down to how people use technology per se. I mean, there's a lot of negative hype around AI. I think in the same way that there was a lot of negative hype around electricity back to those days. So I will keep in mind this analogy because back to those days, electricity was like, oh my God, what is that? Is the devil's kind of a kind of outcome. It's yeah, but it is an opportunity and it's a technology. So it really comes down how to use it. If you want to burn some with an electric shock, that's a way, but actually electricity enables the standard of life that we do have now in Western countries. So yeah, that's the analogy. I think that should be useful to kind of put that kind of conversation to a back to the middle rather than to the extremes because there is a lot of yeah.
Good analogy, actually. Yeah, it makes sense. Oh, well, and next question is, how can you encourage users who would normally avoid AI chatbots to start using them, especially thinking of as a site that has a very diverse users groups?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, which I
Yeah.
think I might be not be able to answer. It really comes down to well, you have to do your due diligence, you do research, because I think it's an interesting question. But how do you encourage it? I think there is no one cookie cutter approach because you really need to understand what is the motivator your user to go to a website or to an app in the first place. That's one thing. What motivates them to go to that particular company, because that another thing that you need to understand. I mean, if your company or if your institution has a reputation for not having good services, they might not want to go to use your chatbot in the first place. So there's many factors that you want to consider. Yeah, and I think very much comes down to the personality of the chatbot, and to create awareness of the chatbot, it really also comes down to UX design in the sense that you might want to place the chatbot in some really specific points in your user journey and in your screen. But actually, yeah, I think there are already lots of amazing solutions and amazing patterns that you can really look at when it comes to where to place, where to make chatbots more visible. But in terms of convincing people to use the chatbot, it really comes down to kind of understand what is the context, what is the right context for them to use the chatbot. So if they do already have a website which is very usable, rich of information, I would ask myself the question: do they really need a chatbot if they are able to kind of if they don't call the customer support, or if they seem to go about with the website and doing fine with it, do you really need to implement a chatbot? So that is my provocative question about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we will have time for one or two more questions. Sorry, guys, but we don't have much time left. I will just pop up next question, and the rest you can just write down on comment section. So the next question is, what are the ethical considerations behind conversational AI development? How do UX designers support in the ethical environment of AI?
Yeah, that's a huge question. I think it would take another webinar to go through. But yeah, and it's a difficult one to answer because it's still like we are in a kind of seminal stage. But actually,
Yeah.
what you can do, it's basically, as I said before, with the example of Amazon, ethics in AI really comes down to the data that you use to train the model that you create, and then the whole process whereby you manage the data. And in the case, I do think, as I shown you, like when you create conversational AI and you train a model just with inputs from a specific segment and you overlook different segments, that's a problem. And this is specifically one particular case in what we call AI governance. So that kind of, how you manage those data in a way which is fair, trustworthy, and ethical. This is one piece where UX play a role, because ultimately, in a project, when you actually have to write down the intents, you have to write down the questions and the topics and the entities, and do that process. It's I mean, there are data scientists that do so, but it's very advisable that designers are in that process, because designers really are those who ask stakeholders, and they do just ask people, ask users questions around the topics that they want to and the goals and their intents and the context. So designers, they do have the foundational knowledge that is needed to kind of create that conversational AI, and therefore they should make sure that they do have inputs from different groups, and to include different groups in building at least the questions and intents and the entities, in order for the conversational system to kind of address all of the people that you want to address. Yeah.
Okay, we will go to the next question. Hi, Katarina.
I'm just
Welcome
going
back.
to say hi as well. I'm really glad to see all these questions. So we'll keep going with a few more. Thank you guys for asking all these questions. We truly appreciate it. And we're glad to hear that all of you guys are interested in this topic and enjoying it as much as we do.
Yeah, so we will go on, right?
Yep.
So the next question is there any types of info that it will be considered appropriate for a chatbot to ask, such as bank details? That's a good question, actually.
Yeah, actually, I'm not super expert in that, but there is compliance in many sectors. Actually, there are rules for different types of businesses and in different types of contexts. But for instance, I had such an experience and I was really upset because I was just, is it right to give this information to, and actually I was with the chat with a flight carrier, and I was basically changing my flight, and there was a transaction involved, and the chat kind of asked me, but there was also a human agent involved. So I would say no, but it really depends on the context you are in. If you are in a secure environment, and because yeah, you really need to make sure that you are in a secure environment, and you are compliant basically with all the regulations of that particular sector or industry you are operating in. Yeah, but actually when you operate in online banking, you maybe you don't input your credit card details or stuff like that, but actually the bot, because you are logged in, he knows who you are, and it kind of say, are you using this credit card, and it shows, and you just click on it. So yeah, so yeah, Generally, no, I've never seen any chatbot asking me for my credit card details. But actually, if you're logged in these systems, they know who you are. They know actually this, yeah, they know your details.
I'm also asked, are there any legal constraints around the development of AI chatbots yet?
Yeah, there are huge frameworks in terms of AI development, and this is why we talk a lot about AI governance at the moment. And we're building also technology to kind of help companies kind of not overcome, to kind of respond appropriately to rules and the regulations that are in places. There are new rules coming out, EU-wise. But yeah, there's a lot of frameworks that companies are supposed to comply with, and suppliers, companies that create that technology, they need to comply with as well, and provide the tools for companies to be compliant and
Yeah, of course.
yeah.
Well, this one is also interesting. Do you think the impact of AI on UX UI sector will be radical?
That's an interesting question. I'm still asking myself if that will be the case. I personally think, yeah, in terms of probably we are not really aware of, but we are already changing. As I said, when once upon a time, our relationship with media was primarily transactional. We just, we would open a web page just to get some information rather than, make a transaction. But actually now there are chatbots that you can chat with when you are not able to fall asleep. So you can use, I mean, it is really shifting to this kind of realm of affective computing. So this kind of ideas of machine and devices also acting as human replacements and companionship. And this is interesting to me. And I think, yeah, it is set to change profoundly the way we do interact with media, at least. And therefore, I do think also as UX professionals, UI professionals, we really need to kind of account for that. Because I think our UX knowledge, the UX domain is still very centered around the kind of, the web kind of the web-like experience that we have read until now, and yeah, which is more like, which is more, it is not it's not kind of symbiotic in a way. There's always a certain distance with the media tools that we are using, but now we are going a step further. That's my view, at least.
Okay, well, I will show you one more question because there are a lot. So, what other fields can conversational AI help us with other than support?
Yeah, I mentioned some of the use cases in the presentation, but for sure, HR, as I said, is a very interesting field. Healthcare, so in terms of providing services like consultations and all of these things. And as I said, maybe in a sort of anonymous way. There are very interesting projects going on in the healthcare space, in the charity space as well, and yeah, in all of these things. Also things like accessibility of products and services, like conversational technologies, really like with speech dictation or language translation. So these capabilities are really useful for people who have impairments to kind of better access products and services through speech, through conversational AI. Yeah, so these are, the most promising use cases, I would say.
Yeah. Well, would you like one more final question? I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Hi, have you seen ChatGPT? Is it based on analyzing petabytes of data from the internet? How do you think a small company should go about its own AI chatbot? can chat GPT be used by a company somehow?
Okay, yeah, yeah, I see Chat GPT. I have no idea if a company can go about and use it. At the moment, I think it's still like, I don't know if it's still a beta testing or anything like that. I don't know if it's still implementable, commercial wise. I actually don't know. No, I don't have no. It might be in the future, but no, I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, it's quite specific question.
Yeah, but I think still it's just launch, and I don't know, I don't know accuracy wise how ready it is for a commercial exploitation, but I'm not super sure.
Okay. Well, this is the end, I think. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Nicola, thanks. Great live, great ideas. Well, we'll read your questions. It's fine, no worries. Uh, this is the end. I would like to thank you all for being here and for listening Sylvia's presentation. I think it was quite interesting and informative. And if you like to answer for us to answer more of your questions, just type it in. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Just type it in our comment section or visit our site uxacademy.com and we will answer everything that you're interested in.
Thank you.
So thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. And oh, Sylvia, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Well, amazing, Weber. Thank you. Kevin says the slides somewhere. Yes, I can answer your questions. So basically, you can go to our website, uxacademy.com, and you can go to our free webinars, and you will find this one, and you will go on that page and receive this presentation. Basically, you can watch our videos there also. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. So yeah, guys, once again, thank you all, and it's time to say goodbye. So have a nice day, evening, wherever you are, where, wherever is your time zone. So thanks and see you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.